Jaime Lannister is easily my favorite portrayal in the entire show. I think in Season 1, he's incredibly underrated as far as his thoughtfulness. While at times he seems a bit nihilistic and a cynic, I think there's plenty of material that suggests Jaime views the world much more honestly than anyone gives him credit for. And they may call him the stupidest Lannister, but I actually believe he's the least delusional of them all. That may not make him brilliant, but I think it makes him arguably one of the most honest characters in the entire show. If you're a fan of Game of Thrones, I imagine that you're very aware of who George R.R. Martin is. For those who somehow don't, he's the author of the A Song of Ice and Fire book series, of which Game of Thrones is adapted. Now, if you are aware of who he is, then you're probably familiar with one of his favorite quotes from William Faulkner, which is, and I quote, "The only thing worth writing about is the human heart in conflict with itself." George has called this his guiding principle. While all of the characters that we're introduced to in Game of Thrones displays conflict within themselves, nobody better embodies this as part of their story than that of Jaime Lannister. For those new to the channel, this is the very first episode in a series of videos covering and discussing Jaime Lannister as he progresses throughout the 8 seasons of Game of Thrones. To see more, please consider subscribing, and if you enjoyed this video, go ahead and leave it a like so YouTube knows to share it with a wider audience. I definitely appreciate it. Starting off in Season 1, we're first introduced to Jaime and Cersei in the same scene. They're in King's Landing, looking on into the throne room as there's a vigil being held for who turns out to be Jon Arryn. There's a couple things here. Cersei criticizes Jaime for not worrying enough about anything, and recalls a time that Jaime jumped from a cliff at Castle Rock into the water. This small detail is interesting because he then references his father's reaction to this situation.
Don't act like fools.
This immediately displays an expectation on Jaime just for carrying the name Lannister. It's subtle, but part of the theme that flows throughout much of the series. Next, it's made clear that Jon Arryn discovered something about Jaime and Cersei, yet there's not much we know about them just yet. So what was discovered could be anything. However, it must be something egregious, as Jaime suggests that if Robert had found out, both their heads would be on spikes. The very next we see Jaime is when the King's party arrives to Winterfell.
That's Jaime Lannister, the Queen's twin brother.
Would you please shut up?
And I really like this small moment. Arya basically adds a brief introduction to a few of the characters as they enter the scene, but including Jaime in this goes to further display that this is a man of reputation whose name travels across the world. Even to this little girl, it's just the Queen's twin brother. Next, Jaime is sent to find Tyrion. I think it's telling of the two brothers' relationship here, as Jaime knows exactly where to find Tyrion. Then the first hint Jaime has less than favorable opinions of the Starks is made, as he tells Tyrion to not leave him alone with these people. Again, it's subtle, but that's what made some of these earlier seasons so great, and that's what they were really all about, was that subtlety. And they were great because of it. And this isn't even a special moment, but I think it makes my point. Now, if you had any doubts about Jaime's affection towards the Starks, this scene makes it clear that there's little admiration. Jaime and Ned clearly know each other, and they're not friends. Now, you may wonder why Jaime antagonizes Ned here. It's unprovoked, and these little things keep happening to gear the audience in a particular direction on how Jaime is viewed. If you make it through Season 3 and come back to all of these smaller scenes, they really do start to carry a lot more weight. It's not obvious here, but Jaime thinks Ned looks down on him, and he's probably right. Now, Ned may not know any better, but hopefully by the end of the series, you as an audience, you will know better, and you'll understand why I think Ned is wrong in his view of Jaime. And I look at these little moments as Jaime lashing out just a little bit. And then next, we have the scene that is truly the catalyst for Jaime becoming the ultimate villain in audiences' minds. I'm not going to pretend there's much more going on here than there is, but when Jaime first grabs Bran, I think there's a slight hesitation, and I could be wrong, but I don't think the decision to shove Bran from the window is made until he sees Cersei's face and that look of concern. And that's the moment he shoves Bran with the, quote, "the things I do for love," quote, end quote. By just saying that, He's conceding that he'll murder a child for Cersei, and he knows this is wrong. The next scene, the Lannisters are having breakfast. Once Cersei and the children leave, Tyrion states he hopes Bran lives, prompting Jaime to question Tyrion, stating at times he wonders whose side he's on. I think this is a small way to suggest more about Tyrion than Jaime, but it furthers the notion that Jaime sees all Starks as enemies, or so it appears to the audience. But a scene that really furthers Jaime's characterization in the first season is when he encounters Jon Snow. It's the last scene of Jaime in Winterfell. He antagonizes Jon for his desire to serve in the Night's Watch. I think this communicates a few things. First, he points out Jon's inexperience when he points out Jon has never killed a man with a sword before. Then, he criticizes the Watch itself by mocking it, calling it an elite force with a condescending, almost sarcastic tone. You also have to consider that the honor and respect the North holds for the Wall doesn't feel the same for Southerners, or at least a lot of them. Jaime knows taking the Black as a punishment for criminals and those who commit treason. If that's your expectation and experience with anyone going to the Night's Watch, how could you see them as honorable? Then mocking the threats beyond the Wall to Jon, as if to suggest wildlings and White Walkers are only things that equate to fairy tales. Lastly, he mocks the tradition of it all. And this, I think, shows you more about Jaime than it lets on. In a world full of vows and honor and pledges, Jaime views these things as silly aspects of traditionalism. There's right, there's wrong, and then there's honor and duty. And I don't think Jaime sees these things as synonymous. But I think this becomes far more apparent in the next scene. So, if after season 3 you don't come back to this scene, I think you're really missing out on how layered it is. And later in season 3, hopefully you recall this interaction. What is honor if it gets in the way of justice? I think that's a relevant question to ask. Jaime starts the scene by antagonizing Ned Stark again, but it's also clear Ned has no respect for Jaime. He views Jaime as a man with no honor. In Ned's worldview, Jaime should have defended the Mad King until death. Even if the Mad King was evil, honor commands Jaime, a man of the King's Guard, to defend him, keep his secrets, and remain silent and by his side until called upon. When Jaime brings up the Mad King killing Ned's father and brother, Ned points out that Jaime did nothing, but honor commanded he do nothing. Yet when Jaime speaks on killing the Mad King, he's criticized. He's criticized for stabbing him in the back.
Tell me, if I stabbed the Mad King in the belly instead of the back, would you admire me more?
Ned doesn't seem as if he'd give him admiration for stabbing the king in the belly either. Now, if Jaime killed the king before the king murdered Ned's family, perhaps that would be viewed differently by Ned. You could also say that Ned thought Jaime served when it was safe and betrayed his king when he knew the war was lost. Someone commented on my Ned video about that, and I definitely see Ned's point better because of that comment, so thank you. But from Jaime's perspective, he feels damned if he does and damned if he doesn't. In a later scene, he shares that the Mad King was calling out to burn them all. Yet Jaime never points this out to Ned for whatever reason. Ned doesn't know that Jaime prevented the Mad King from killing more people. But even if he did know, it would still mean Jaime betrayed his king and his honor. Jaime says it felt like justice, and I believe that's truly how he feels. Now, if he felt that killing the king was justice, but has been labeled dishonorable by Ned and others, and called Kingslayer from that point on, I think it explains his contempt for the traditionalism that compels a man like Ned Stark. If justice is dishonorable, maybe honor is stubborn foolishness. Now, the next scene, I think, really helps keep up the villain persona for Jaime is when he encounters Cersei. When they learn that Bran has awoken, although Bran remembers nothing, Jaime expresses that he'll kill everyone and even go to war with Robert Baratheon if he must. He'll kill everyone until he and Cersei are the only ones left. If this scene does nothing else for Jaime's characterization, it definitely shows by his words. Cersei is worth everything to him, and for her, he'll do anything. This really shows that human heart in conflict well, and in every aspect of his character so far. Justice or honor? Jaime can only pursue one, peace or love. For Jaime to truly be with Cersei as any man would want to be with the woman they love, it would require war and madness. So he can love her, but it's always going to be incomplete because it must be a secret. If that secret ever gets out, it means war. We follow that scene up with a scene with Robert Baratheon and Sir Barristan Selmy exchanging war stories. I like this scene because it does humanize Jaime. You can tell when he describes a kill that Barristan had, how much Jaime admires him by complimenting the killing move Barristan struck. Jaime tells how he got his first kill, but then Robert asks about Aerys, the Mad King, and what he said when he died. Again, Jaime shares the Mad King yelled the same thing he'd been yelling for hours: "Burn them all." I like the two actors here looking at each other. It's as if Robert understood something in this moment for the very first time about what really happened in that throne room during the rebellion. Then Jaime seems kind of smug because, like Robert said, he never asked about it. It doesn't seem anyone has asked what happened and just deemed him a dishonorable kingslayer. And if Tywin wasn't his father and Cersei not his sister, he'd probably have been executed or sent to the wall. But he's Jaime Lannister, and being a Lannister matters, as we learn all too well. Next, Jory brings a message from Lord Stark for the king, but Jaime is guarding the door. Jaime immediately complains to Jory that Robert does this specifically when he's on guard, makes him listen as Robert insults his sister. Again, his duty, his honor compels him to listen to his sister's husband have sex with numerous other women. Wouldn't you start to question what honorable is too, if you were Jaime? Jaime and Jory discuss the siege of Pike for a bit, and Jaime intuitively questions Jory's statement that Theon is a good lad. Jaime is overall rude to Jory, maintaining his antagonist's role, and makes it clear he does not serve Lord Stark. But just before that, they do foreshadow this, or at least offer an Easter egg, if you want to call it that, when reference is made to Jory's scar. He says one of the Greyjoys nearly took his eye out. Well, let's go ahead and segue that into our next scene. Jaime confronts Ned in front of Littlefinger's brothel. He asks about Tyrion, and the very moment Ned states he had Catelyn take Tyrion at his command, there is a fantastic slight fire in Jaime's eyes as he draws his sword. Jaime is ready to start a war for Tyrion. At Jaime's command, the Lannister soldiers kill the outnumbered Stark soldiers with ease. Jory, foolishly, attacks Jaime, and then we go back to when these two reference the Greyjoy nearly taking his eye. Jaime actually does take Jory's eye in the process of killing him. With the Lannisters surrounding him, Ned Stark engages Jaime. Now, I'm not going to dismiss Ned's sword fighting abilities here, but one of the two men are clearly having a much easier time, and one of them is having to put forth much greater effort. At least that's how I perceived it. But then at the end of the episode, Dan Benioff and D.B. Weiss both describe it as an even fight, and Jaime actually sees his life as in danger. Now look, this may be an example of D&D being disconnected from their own writing, or I'm wrong and the fight was even. But I don't think this is significant, and I don't want to waste a lot of time talking about it. I don't think it changes Jaime's character one way or another, so I'm going to move on. So Jaime is fighting Ned straight up, attacking him in the street, but it's a fair sword fight until one of the Lannister soldiers impales Ned's leg with a spear. Now Jaime has been on this trajectory of becoming a villain this whole time, but this is another wonderful piece of confliction for Jaime. Ned in the North will always be a threat, now and after this moment. And the wisest thing to do is kill him when he had the chance. All the witnesses are Lannister soldiers and Littlefinger, whose loyalties are flexible. Yet Jaime knocks out the soldier who impaled Ned in the leg. He elaborates on this in a moment with his father Tywin Lannister. But that spoke a lot to how Jaime does want to appear and appease to the concept of honor. He's clearly mad that the fight was interfered with, even if it was in his favor. This is a great warrior and warden of the North. To kill him, to kill Ned Stark in single combat would offer Jaime a lot of validation. Now moving on to one of the more badass introductions of a character, we see Jaime reading off the words that Ned Stark wrote commanding Tywin to come to the capital to answer for his bannerman Clegane's crimes. Tywin calls Jaime's attack stupid and states that Lannisters do not act like fools. I know this scene is mostly utilized to display the true power of the Lannister family being Tywin, but watching Jaime's reaction to his father's words is insightful. Here, Jaime clarifies when he's asked why Ned is still alive, and Jaime states that would not have been clean. Tywin scoffs at this and accuses Jaime of caring too much for what other people think of him. This is where we first hear the line, "A lion doesn't concern himself with the opinions of sheep." I think this is important to note. Tywin was not in favor of Jaime attacking Ned. Jaime did this all on his own and all out of love and honor for his brother Tyrion, and essentially declared war. Because if Tywin was going to go to war with the Starks anyway, why is he critical of Jaime attacking Ned? This really displays the conflict in Jaime. Honor the family name, honor the Kingsguard oath, be honorable, but don't care what people think of you. Don't attack Ned, but if you do, make sure you kill him, even if it's not clean. I think you can really see how confused Jaime's priorities can become just with his place in the world, but then add to it that the greatest thing he's ever done, that being killing the Mad King, has been the primary thing he's been despised for. And to top it off, he's in love with his own sister, who in Game of Thrones has a human heart in greater conflict with itself. Anyway, Jaime is given an army from Tywin to go after Catelyn and Robb and the rest of the North. We don't see Jaime again until the Battle of Whispering Wood that is fought off screen. Jaime is captured after a few quick verbal exchanges with Catelyn, and I might say, witty exchanges made up a great part of Jaime's character throughout the first 3 seasons, and it could be losing his hand changed this, but I do miss his clever banter from the earlier seasons a lot. Now, upon being captured, he suggests a straight duel between himself and Robb Stark to end the war. Jaime is a phenomenal swordsman, and when it comes to war, it's his greatest attribute. However, he quickly learns how handicapped he truly is when combat is not an option, and he becomes prisoner of the Starks. Jaime's last scene in Season 1 is as he's prisoner and Catelyn comes to see him. This is one area that I believe the books offer just a little bit more context, specifically about Jaime's reasoning and story about killing the Mad King. I think this better contextualizes this scene in the throne room between Jaime and Ned, but if you haven't read Clash of Kings yet, you could kind of take this as a spoiler warning. I don't really feel that this is spoiling a whole lot what I'm about to say next, but you have been warned. So the show breaks this up across season 1 and 2, but in the book, Jaime reveals the manner in which Ned's brother and father are killed. He speaks of killing Aerys and toasts to his golden sword that ran red with blood. He claims these are the Lannisters' colors. Catelyn criticizes him for taking pride in such a thing. Jaime expresses that he finds it odd that he's reviled for his finest act. Jaime believes he did the right thing. Now in the show, Catelyn questions Jaime about Bran after hitting him in the head with a good-sized rock. She questions him for not fearing death. He questions the gods, particularly Ned's gods. Then he says, the one thing I believe he struggles with the very most. He says, if the gods are real and just, why is the world so full of injustice? Catelyn says because of men like him. He quickly states there are no men like him, just him. She asks, how did her son come to fall from that tower? Jaime is quick to say that he shoved him. In both the show and book, Catelyn is kind of taken back by how quickly he answers. When she asks why, he quickly remarks that he had hoped the fall would kill him. When asked why again, referring to why Jaime wanted to kill Bran, he doesn't answer. Maybe it's shame, maybe he fears consequences for everyone if the truth about him and Cersei comes out. Now in the books, Catelyn gets him drunk and Jaime confesses essentially everything, yet denies knowing about the dagger and the cat's paw. I think this is kind of done differently in both the show and the books, and I kind of like both versions of this. So it's really just personal preference. I'm not going to reference the books now, at least for the rest of this video, but even with the confessions and the story about Ned's brother and father left out, I think most audiences see Jaime at this point in the show as still a significant villain. But there's cracks, and light is glittering through at times. I can't tell what he's thinking about when Catelyn leaves him at the end of his final scene in Season 1, but he's clearly reflecting, and I think Jaime is one of the few characters that's willing to reflect and reconsider everything. Is he agnostic? Does he pray to the Seven? I'm not sure, but he's certainly critical of that traditional thinking. He is thinking differently than most characters. He all but questions the whole system of honor, and when you truly look at his story, everything he does betrays some sort of vow. If he's not sacrificing his honor, he's sacrificing justice. At least that's how it appears to him. And we'll dive into those vows and kind of cross-examine the following seasons with the books as well if needed. I'm trying my best to leave the books out of these videos because I think that Game of Thrones can stand on its own. Even with where it faltered there towards the end in seasons 5 through 8, I still think that they built a solid enough foundation that if just a few things were handled a little bit differently in the later seasons, we may have had more stability to finish out the series. But I'm gauging Jaime and any of these other character reviews that I do, just like the Ned Stark review, solely on the show. So if you have not read the books, although I do highly recommend you do, you don't need to read those books to watch these videos, and you definitely don't need to read the books to watch the show. I just think Jaime is such a rich character, and that conflict of the human heart just pours out of almost every scene he's in this first season, and really until the end of season 3. I think he is the most conflicted character in Game of Thrones all the way until the end. I know he's portrayed as a villain in season 1, but I believe there are cracks in there that show that he's struggling with what's right and what's honorable and what he sees as justice and injustice. Now please let me know if you like this video and what your thoughts are on Jaime's moral compass, because I think it's fascinating. I want to break these videos up over each season and make a final video summarizing my thoughts on the character in its entirety after we get through all the videos covering each season. I'd love for you guys to please comment below. Let me know what you think I may have missed out, what do you think I might be perceiving as wrong, and I'll try to collect all of those comments and kind of act as a sort of a collaboration for that final video, for that final recap of Jaime Lannister. So look for the second video in this series to be out here within about a week. And then if you guys like this video, please hit that like button. And if you're new here, go ahead and hit the subscribe button so that you can be notified of future videos, especially in this series if you'd like to keep up with my coverage of the Jaime Lannister character in Game of Thrones. These particular videos require just a little bit more effort, and the positive responses have definitely made it very worth it. So thank you very much, and thank you for watching.